This is NHK World Japan. We bring you the news from Radio Japan at 11 hours UTC on Thursday, August the 1st. I'm Michael Reese.
And I'm Mary.
This is NHK World Japan. We bring you the news from Radio Japan at 11 hours UTC on Thursday, August the 1st. I'm Michael Reese.
And I'm Mariko Kojima.
In our top stories, relations between Japan and South Korea appear to be at a stalemate as the country's foreign ministers mainly repeated their stances on thorny current issues on Thursday.
North Korea's state-run media says the country's leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the testing of a new type of rocket system.
And the U.S. Federal Reserve has cut its key interest rate for the first time in over a decade. Now the news in detail. Relations between Japan and South Korea appear to be at a stalemate as the country's foreign ministers mainly repeated their stances on thorny current issues on Thursday. Taro Kono and Kang Kyung-hwa sat down for about an hour on the sidelines of ASEAN meetings in Bangkok. Both appeared tense and didn't speak to reporters at the meeting. Japanese officials say Kono once again conveyed Tokyo's position on the trade and wartime labor issues dividing the two neighbors. Since last October, South Korea's Supreme Court has issued a series of rulings ordering Japanese companies to compensate people who claim they were forced to work for those firms during World War II. Assets belonging to the companies have also been seized, and some plaintiffs have taken court procedures to sell them off. The Japanese government maintains the issue of the right to claim compensation was settled when a bilateral agreement was signed in 1965. Tokyo has asked Seoul to enter third-party arbitration based on the agreement, but Seoul has not responded. Kono expressed regret over Seoul not replying and once again demanded it correct the current situation, which he described as a violation of international law. Separately, the two ministers discussed Japan's moves to tighten export controls. Tokyo is considering dropping Seoul from a list of nations granted preferential trade status. A formal decision on the revision is expected in the coming days. Kang demanded Tokyo cancel the move, while Kono explained the delisting is part of a routine review of Japan's export control system. The South Korean foreign minister spoke to reporters after the meeting. She suggested Seoul would retaliate, saying the issue requires time if the two sides cannot resolve it through negotiations. Kang said, "If Japan decides to take South Korea off the list at a cabinet meeting on Friday, we have no choice but to take action against such a move." The two foreign ministers will meet again on Friday with the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He has described it as an opportunity to help Tokyo and Seoul find a path forward.
North Korea's state-run media says the country's leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the testing of a new type of large-caliber multiple-launch guided rocket system. The media report says that Kim was satisfied with the results and that the system would strengthen North Korea's fighting capability. South Korean officials say the launch happened early Wednesday morning near the eastern city of Wonsan and that the projectiles flew about 250 kilometers. South Korea's defense minister strongly criticized the launch, saying, "If the North threatens and provokes us, its regime and military should be regarded as an enemy." Wednesday's launch is the second in the past week. Last Thursday, the North test-fired a pair of short-range ballistic missiles from the same area. Pyongyang claimed those missiles were a new type of tactical guided weapon and served as a warning over a planned joint military drill between South Korea and the United States. The UN Security Council is set to meet on Thursday to discuss the launches.
U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton says the U.S. is waiting for North Korea to resume working-level talks on its denuclearization. In an interview with Fox Business Network, Bolton commented on North Korea's tests of two short-range ballistic missiles on Wednesday. Bolton said the firing of those missiles didn't violate the pledge that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made to President Donald Trump that his country will not launch intercontinental range ballistic missiles. But Bolton said the question is when the real diplomacy is going to begin. He said the U.S. government is still waiting to hear from the North. The North Korean official met his White House counterpart at the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas last week and said the working-level talks would start very soon. The U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, is visiting Thailand, which is hosting the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Regional Forum. North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho has cancelled a planned visit to the forum.
Defense Minister Takeshi Iwaya has reiterated that Japan is carefully considering its response to a U.S. plan to form an international coalition to ensure security in the Strait of Hormuz. The United States invited countries to the headquarters of its Fifth Fleet in Bahrain on Wednesday to provide a technical explanation on the plan from a military aspect. Iwaya told reporters on Thursday in Tokyo that Self-Defense Force liaison officers stationed in Bahrain attended the meeting. The command of a multinational task force for counter-piracy operations off Somalia is located in the country. He said he's been briefed of the meeting, but declined to talk about what was discussed and Japan's possible response. Iwaya said Japan will continue to work closely with the United States and other countries concerned to gather information and determine the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and the international community. He said the government will make a comprehensive decision on what to do.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has cut its key interest rate for the first time in over a decade. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says the move is to deal with uncertainty in the global economy and low inflation in the U.S. The target range of the benchmark rate is set at 2 to 2.25%, down a quarter of a percentage point. It's the Fed's first cut since December 2008, when the world was in the throes of the financial crisis. Fed policymakers noted that the U.S. economy is expanding at a moderate pace, but they warned that the U.S.-China trade dispute and other factors are making the outlook increasingly uncertain. The Fed chair suggested that the cut is to deal with current conditions rather than marking the start of an extended loosening trend. Powell said it's not the beginning of a long series of rate cuts. When you talk rate-cutting cycle, they go on for a long time. The committee is not seeing that. What we're seeing is that it's appropriate to adjust policy to a somewhat more accommodating stance over time, and that's how we are looking at. Rather, right after the announcement, President Donald Trump complained the move was insufficient. He tweeted, "Powell let us down, but at least he is ending quantitative tightening." The president added he is not getting much help from the Fed. Trump, who is seeking re-election next year, has repeatedly pressured the Fed to cut rates.
Tokyo stocks initially fell sharply on Thursday, but regained some ground to finish slightly higher. The Nikkei average ended at 21,540, up 19 points from Wednesday's close. Market players say although the index plunged more than 200 points immediately after the opening, investors bought back shares amid the weakening of the yen. They say many investors remain on the fence as they're looking to see how the Fed's first rate cut in more than 10 years will affect the U.S. economy and financial policies.
Japanese electronics giant Panasonic saw sales and operating profit drop for the April to June quarter amid China's economic slowdown. Panasonic said group sales during the 3 months totaled about $17.4 billion. That was down 5.9% from a year earlier. Operating profit totaled about $519 million, down 43.6%. The decline is attributed to weak sales in China of electronic parts for industrial use, such as motors and sensors, and a drop in television sales, mostly in Europe. The full-year earnings forecast remains unchanged. Panasonic CFO Hirokazu Umeda said at a news conference on Wednesday the effects of China's economic slowdown have been factored in. He said the company will keep a close eye on developments there.
You're listening to Radio Japan of the NHK World Japan Network. The United Nations says a record number of children were killed or maimed in armed conflicts around the world in 2018. The world body released an annual report on children in armed conflict on Tuesday, the latest since it decided to publish children's sufferings in conflict areas in 2005. The report says more than 12,000 children were killed or maimed last year. That's the highest since it began the survey. The report says that more than 7,000 children across the world were recruited and sent to the front line as soldiers. Somalia, Nigeria, and Syria had the highest numbers. There were also numerous cases of sexual violence against boys and girls. The report adds that many school buildings were destroyed in armed conflicts. In the West African country of Mali, 827 schools remained closed last year, leaving more than 240,000 children with no access to education. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres issued a statement urging all parties in conflict to refrain from directing attacks at civilians, including children. He reiterated that peace remains the best protection for children affected by armed conflict.
The Japanese government has held a projection mapping event at the Golestan Palace in Tehran to mark 90 years of diplomatic ties with Iran. Symbols of the two countries, such as Mount Fuji and Persian rugs, were projected onto the outer wall of the UNESCO World Heritage Site on Wednesday evening. The first Japanese diplomat to be sent to Iran presented his credentials at the palace in 1929. Japan's Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Kenji Yamada, said in a speech that Japan wants to promote the historic bilateral relationship despite the harsh situation in the region. Shinzo Abe became the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit Iran in 41 years in June. Abe held talks with President Hassan Rouhani and the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a bid to de-escalate the tensions between Iran and the United States.
A Japanese organization that offers technical training for engineers from developing countries has held an event in Tokyo to mark its 60th anniversary. About 400 people who have received training from the Association for Overseas Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Partnerships attended the event on Thursday. They come from 41 countries and territories, including Nepal and Indonesia. The association says it accepted 200,000 engineers over the course of the past 6 decades. Some of them are said to have formed alumni groups after returning to their home countries. In Thailand, alumni members founded a college to provide courses on Japanese manufacturing techniques. Some of its graduates are reportedly working for Japanese-affiliated companies.
An international project to build the world's largest telescope on a Hawaii mountaintop has been effectively postponed due to opposition from native Hawaiians. Astronomers from Japan, the US, and other countries plan to build a reflecting telescope that's 30 meters in diameter atop the 4,200-meter-high Mauna Kea on Hawaii Island. Native Hawaiians have been protesting the construction because they regard the site as sacred. A number of protesters were detained by the police, prompting Hawaii Governor David Ige to declare an emergency on July 17th to ensure safe construction work. Still, protests continued. On Tuesday, Ige retracted the emergency proclamation after some members of the project said they want to postpone construction for 2 years. Ige explained that he made the decision because the telescope project is not urgent. Wako Aoki of the National Astronomy Observatory of Japan says project members will listen to the views of all Hawaiians and consider steps so that construction can start as soon as possible.
Sweltering heat continues in wide areas of Japan, with temperatures topping 38 degrees Celsius at some locations. Weather officials are urging people to take precautions against heat stroke. The daytime high marked 38.4 degrees in Mino City, Gifu Prefecture, and it was 38.1 degrees in Toyota City, Aichi Prefecture. In central Tokyo, the mercury reached 35 degrees, the highest for this year. Officials also say this extreme heat will likely continue for around 1 week in wide areas. They recommend people stay hydrated and use air conditioners to avoid heat stroke. And that was the news from Radio Japan of the NHK World Japan Network. I'm Eriko Kojima.
And I'm Michael Reese.
Please stay tuned.
Are operating there illegally. The differences in opinion remain among ASEAN members.